Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee here today. And today I'm going to be talking about how to put together an entire strategy for your AI efforts. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about how to put together an 18-month strategy and why that is so important. Now, when I tell people it's important to put an AI strategy together that's going to go out 6 quarters or 18 months, people think I'm insane because how do you put together a strategy when everything is constantly changing? The technology is changing, the people are changing, the competition is changing. It literally feels like it's changing underneath the feet that we're standing on the ground that we're standing on. So the idea of putting together anything longer than a quarter or two seems just crazy. And yet I think it's extremely important to do this. And the problem, I think, is the way that we think about strategy. So I would love to hear from you how you're developing your AI strategy. And in particular, what does your execution plan look like? How are you putting it together? And of course, say hello, say where you're coming from. Would love to hear what you're doing. So great greetings, Jay. Thank you so much again for joining. And then as I get into the slides, Jay will also be very kindly putting up the link to it too. So I can't put it in on other places. So let me get into the slides today. So I'm going to just start with this idea why you need a plan and a flexible plan. Because structure without flexibility is bureaucracy. This is what my co-author, Katja Welsh, talks about all the time, is that if you have structure, but you're not flexible about how that structure is being put together, that's bureaucracy. But if you have a lot of flexibility without structure, then that's just chaos. So the key is to have these two very contradictory ideas together, flexibility and structure. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. In particular, how do you put together a plan for your generative AI strategy that is both structured, so you have clear expectations and responsibilities, and then also gives you a lot of flexibility. And the way that I think about this, excuse me, hold on for a second. And the way I think about this, sorry, I'm losing my voice today a little bit. and sorry about that. And so the way to think about this is to think about what I call the 6 quarter walk. And the 6 quarter walk says that over the next 6 quarters, this is what we're going to do. This is what we will accomplish quarter by quarter to get to our goal, our vision of where we want to be 18 months from now. And the reason why this is so powerful, and I do want to stress that this is not something unique to AI. I've seen and used this model through many, many different types of transformations. And it has a great reasons why this works. First of all, it clarifies and sets what expectations we have around execution. You have your 18-month vision of where you want to be, but then you bring it forward, build it backwards over those 6 quarters and say, how are we going to get there? Quarter by quarter, what do we have to do to achieve our goal in 18 months? And when I talk to most organizations, they kind of throw up their hands and say, well, we don't even know what we're going to do this quarter, let alone next quarter, which is why, again, you need to have a plan. And it also creates transparency about where people need to be and accountability, because if you're not executing on your part of the plan, it's going to become very obvious. It also keeps what I call jackrabbits very focused on what needs to be done today. You know who these people are. They're the ones who go, I've got this great idea. We need to be doing it now. This is what we have to do. And you can point to the 6 quarter walk and say, that's a great idea. We have it slated for Q3 or Q4. And we just can't get there to do that unless we have these other capabilities in place. These are other priorities we have to have. And so you can ask that jackrabbit then to say, help us build those foundations so that we can get to that point to execute on your fantastic idea. It also keeps your turtles moving because they just may not be comfortable with this pace. But you can say, look, I know you want to take more time, but we need to get to this point by the end of this quarter in order for everything else to work. If you don't meet our expectations, then we're going to fall behind. What do you need? What do you need from us to be able to execute? It also allows you to have adjustments over that time. So at the end of each quarter, and I'll talk about how to do that. At the end of each quarter, you can make adjustments for the rest of the time. And then also, it's rolling and extending. At the end of the first quarter, you're making all those adjustments for the next 5 quarters, and then you're adding another quarter to keep the focus 18 months out. It isn't that it's 18 and then 15, 12, and so on, shrinking. It is constantly changing. It's a rolling plan to keep you focused on where you want to be in the future. Now, this can sound really hard because if you go through an annual strategy planning process, you know it typically starts in September and October, and that keeps going until you get to the end of the year and you have a plan for the next year. I believe that's not necessarily strategy. That's a budgeting exercise. And budgets are not strategy plans. So don't confuse a budget with something that you have to stick with your strategy. A strategy is much more focused on where you want to be and what are the steps you're going to take along that way. And what the most interesting ways that people are doing this is that they're making adjustments to their budgets as well every single quarter. Now, they want to keep inside an overall budget. They want to stay inside a plan, but there's flexibility from quarter to quarter to take advantage of opportunities. Or if you have found additional gains and savings, then you can roll that into the plan too as well. So I want to go on and talk a little bit more about some of the other things that I think are so important. Let me add it back in here. Okay, so how do you create that vision? And that vision 18 months from now is very based on where you expect artificial intelligence to be creating value for the organization. In particular, I like to look at it through the lens of customers. So, what are your customers? Which customers are you focused on? And in particular, not the customers of today, but the customers of the future. And the more you can look out into the future, the more disruptive you can be. The research I did was in my work on research, on disruption, is that the most disruptive companies aren't the ones who are coming up with the newest technologies. They're the ones with the brightest and furthest looking out into the future of where their customers are going to be. So they're anticipating, they're doing research on it, and they're building today for this future customer tomorrow that's going to be there. And they have a very well thought out way of what the needs and expectations of those customers are. And in particular, how is artificial intelligence, how is AI going to change the way that those expectations are going to be expressed and how you're going to change the way you meet them. You also want to look at how you create value and the ways that you create value. How will that change with AI? Will you be able to have new capabilities and skills? Will you be able to do things in a much faster and better way? Will your processes be changing? What changes will you go through as an organization to create value, to meet the needs of these changing customers? And then finally, how is AI going to change the willingness of your customers to pay you? If they know you're using AI, you're doing it with less effort and time, would they expect to maintain that value exchange? Or would they say, hey, it's taking less for you to make this. We want some of that value creation back as lower prices. So having a vision of where you're going to be 18 months from now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but have an idea, write it down in pencil, and set that as your objectives for the next 18 months. Now, this is extremely important because oftentimes we as leaders don't like to set something down in stone because we think it might be wrong. We might not be right. We need to do a lot more analysis around this. And instead of thinking about it as setting it down in stone, think about it as written in pencil. This is your best guess of where things will be. And a quarter from now, we'll have a much better idea if our guess was in the right direction or if we have to shift it or maybe even completely go in a different direction. But you won't know until you start heading in that direction whether it's the right one or not. And you're not going to learn a lot more by staying where you are and just doing more analysis without that additional data you get from executing. So what I want to do next is talk about how to determine feasibility. So working backwards from the 18 months, you have all these ideas of ways to create value for your customer, ways to increase the value in your own processes. And so what are the skills of data and technology that you're going to need 18 months from now to deliver to those customers? How are your processes going to evolve? Are your partners across the organization and outside of the organization ready to execute on this? So this is starting to look at feasibility. And the three very important questions to ask is the desirability, the marketability. Will someone want it in 18 months? Your feasibility. Can you actually make this? Can you actually execute on this? And then finally, the viability. Can you sustain it over a long period of time? So, looking at those three criteria, you look at all the options you have, you start pulling together the opportunities that you have there too, as well. So this is a very different way of thinking about things. And I just wanted to just see if there are any questions here. We have one comment here from Jay. We are caught between those two factors of being structured and chaos, looking at things on a monthly and quarterly timelines. That's great, Jay. Thank you for sharing that. It is this constant tension, I think, between how do we look at things. And I would invite you to move from thinking about things from a monthly and quarterly to a multiple quarterly ways of looking future into the future as well. And it sounds like, Jay, you're being very flexible at doing this, but and really trying to find that balance inside your organization. So thank you very much for sharing that. And Leonardo, I see you coming in from Brazil, so thank you so much for joining here today too as well. So I want to go on and just talk about two more quick things. So the first thing is how you can map out those execution expectations. So if you were joining me here last week, you saw this chart as a way of thinking about the capabilities as you're doing assessments about your strategy. Well, this is another way to look at that. If you look at the applications and use cases you want to roll out over the next 6 quarters, what are the capabilities you are going to need to have? How will they change? How are the new things that you want to be able to do across your leadership and culture, the people and the skills? Do you have the processes, the data, and the technology in particular to make this work? And then also, what are the results, the outputs that you expect at the end of each quarter? So this is a very high level plan, but having this and understanding how everybody across the organization is being expected to show up creates a tremendous amount of alignment about where we are heading, what we are trying to do. And the 6-quarter walk is sort of like the money graphic about where this is how we think about things. So literally, the way I see the 6-quarter walk being used is at the beginning of our meetings, we pull it out and say, this is where we are. This is where we're ahead. This is where we're falling behind. Let's do a check-in and see how it's working. Now, everybody does this just a slightly different way. And the thing I would encourage you to do, it's not so much the details into what goes into the plan that matters, it's the fact that you have the plan. And so in the beginning, it may be very, very high level. Over time, though, because you have something that people can look at, comment on, react to, bang it back and forth, argue about, it becomes richer. But unless you write it down, it does not exist. So write it down, use it as a starting point, and then be able to start filling in all of those details. All right, the last thing I do want to talk about today is how do you do these quarterly reviews? And what's happening is throughout the quarter, you're checking in regularly with everyone to make sure how are you doing in terms of executing? Are we still on track to get to the end of this quarter? Is everyone here? Literally just looking around and checking in and say, do you have everything that you need? And then really encourage people to say, if they do not, as early as possible, to raise their hands and going, it's not going as we planned. And you'll probably know some other people who may be ahead, then they can come back and help these other ones who may be falling behind through no fault of their own. It's just that whatever it is that you set out to do is harder than you anticipated, or the resources aren't there, or the technology isn't working. So to put extra effort into that area so that we can make sure it's caught up, or we know we've done our best to make it work. And then figure out, again, a few weeks before the end of the quarter, start doing the quick review. It's a very quick review. How are we in terms of the progress? What adjustments do we anticipate we're going to have to make? How is the landscape changing? What new tools or technologies are now available? How are our capabilities changing, accelerating, or falling behind? you have all of that information. And at the end of the quarter, you can make adjustments to where you actually are going to be at the end of the quarter. And also the implications of that going out all the way through quarters 2 through 6. So it's a ripple effect all the way down. And then you add another quarter to the end. You're saying, what does the world look like 18 months from now? How much are we having to adjust that? And when I've seen this being used, it's used very effectively. It's a very quick review because you already know and have anticipated these are the things that could be variables to our strategy. These are the biggest assumptions and the biggest bets that we are making. And are they coming true or are they not? How do we have to adjust that based on what we now know? And the reason I love the 6 quarter walk so much, it doesn't require that you know everything at the beginning of the walk. You can add information, subtract information, do all the different things as you go on the walk to adjust your trajectory, adjust your plan of where you're going to walk, how you're going to get there, the strategies and things that you will take on to do. So I think in this way, the 6 quarter walk is an incredibly powerful framework that you can use to put together a robust strategy that can then be used to align everyone across the organization to decide your strategy. And again, a strategy is you deciding where you're going to play and how you're going to win. It's what we talked about last week. All right, so I want to see here if there are any questions that we have. Also, I just want to encourage you to share if you have any processes that you've used or any questions, then please, I would love to hear how you're actually doing things. All right, I have a couple comments here. So Leonardo shares, the main skill would be the preparation of teams and changing the C-levels mindset. This is very hard. Absolutely agreed. It's if you look back at my slide on capabilities, let me just pull it up here for a second. The one at the very top here, capabilities, is leadership and culture. So Leonardo, you're absolutely right. I look at leadership and culture as the foundational things you have to put in place, because unless that is shifting and changing, it's not going to get there. And oftentimes I look at this as how many people in the leadership are engaged and involved in something like the 6 quarter walk. Are they paying attention to it? How much of their time is being focused on executing on this walk too as well? Let's see. Jay has a comment. With so much change taking place with the technology, our challenge is where we put the stake in the ground, if that is possible. I'll be talking about that in my next live stream, Jay, because it can be very daunting to say, well, I'm going to invest in this technology, but what happens if it changes? And are we just going to be out of a lot of money? And very early on, like a year ago, people were starting to build their own LLMs and investing millions of dollars into building a custom GPT, an LLM. And now it's super easy to do that 1 year later. So there are techniques that you can do where you're buying the least, the most generic platforms and then waiting for the tooling to come out, or you can go build custom. And we'll talk about how do you decide to do that and where do you put your tech and data investments. Let's see, Leonardo says, do you believe that the lean startup mindset can help companies to experiment more and learning the strategy, get the longer vision? Absolutely. So lean startup, agile, anything that creates and focuses on flexibility is a really important part. But as you know from the lean startup and also from agile methodologies, there is a lot of structure to that flexibility. And so there is no one way to do this. But I think it's this balance that we talk about between having great structure, but then also having flexibility in that structure to make changes to that. And the balance of that is hard to figure out and to make work, which is why the 6 quarter walk, the sooner you can get it down in writing, the sooner you have experience and how it works inside of your organization, the better off you will be. I will set expectations that the first quarter it's a little messy. It's extremely messy. It's gnarly. It's not well thought through because you've never done it before. But if your objective, again, is to have a plan sketched out over 18 months and you can understand the value of having that structure, that is the overwhelming desire and need to have some structure to say, this is where we want to be. And this is how we're going to get there. What we will do, what we won't do, what we will play, and how we will win. Then you can work out all the details underneath. What are things that we know absolutely have to be delivered every quarter? Which are the things that we absolutely have to invest in and prioritize to make this whole thing work? And where are the places where we're going to just have to be flexible because we have no idea how it's going to play out? We're making some educated guesses here. I'll like to say you have the minimally viable data to make a decision, not all of the data to make the perfect decision, but just the minimally viable data that you need to feel that option A is a little better than option B. Then make that decision and see what happens. So this is again one of the things that is so difficult to do, I think, in this space is how do you make a decision when you have very little data, very little information about how the future is going to unfold. And this is where I do believe that having a very healthy relationship with experimentation, having a healthy relationship with failure is extremely valuable. So to Leonardo's point, again, agile mindsets, lean startup mentalities and frameworks, these are all different ways to get at the same idea, but put it into, again, a longer plan so that you can anticipate what are the big changes going to have to and make in order to get the big impact you want in 18 months. So that's what I have for today. I hope this is helpful. Again, you can get the slides here at charlinglee.com/6-quarter-walk. And I will be taking next week off. I'm going to be speaking just right around the live stream time. So I didn't want to have those two things conflict too much. But join me in 2 weeks on Tuesday, May 14th at this regular time to discuss how do you put together an AI tech and data stack that makes sense, isn't going to cost you an arm and a leg, and still can adjust and be flexible as you are growing your business and organizations in its AI capabilities. One other quick thing, I am holding a webinar next week on May 8th, talking about how to go and develop this strategy. I'll be giving a bigger picture of how to wrap this whole thing together. I've been piecemealing it out in the live streams, but I wanted to take this opportunity to pull together a whole entire big picture of how to do that. So join me for that webinar next week on Wednesday. You can get more information at bit.ly/GenAI-strategy. All right, that's what I have for today. Good luck to all of you as you put together your generative AI strategies. I would love to hear from you. You, as my audience, are the people that make this so rewarding and so fun to do. So I'd love to hear what's working for you, what isn't, any questions that you have, because that is extremely valuable and super helpful to me. Oh, we have one last question here, Jay, from Dan. The 6-quarter walk is critical to achieving a company's objectives. It is essential to keep the jackrabbits focused and turtles moving. Additionally, Dan says he has a weekly meeting, ensuring a 13-week sprint on those quarterly objectives each quarter. I love that idea. It's not a 2-week sprint in the agile methodology. It's a 13-week sprint. That's a great way to think about it, Dan. Thank you for that. Let's see. I think that's it for today. For everyone joining, Leonardo, Ben, saying hi to you too, Ben Linton, and then Dan again. Thank you for that comment. Take care, everybody, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.